Good morning. Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Brian Baker, and I am the worship associate for our virtual service today alongside our minister, Zachary Vinson. Let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes, the homelands of the Snohomish, Duwamish, Clallam, and Chimicum people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliots and Point No Point treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship, ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take time either now or later in the service to make a contribution to help sustain Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, we welcome you. In the beauty of who you love and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. Whether you come feeling whole, feeling broken, or anywhere in between, we welcome you. No matter how long you've been away, nor how soon you will return, we welcome you. You are invited to join us with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. We welcome you today and always. Water is inseparable from the life of Gaia, this living world of interdependent coevolution. It flows through the skies and carves deep valleys and canyons. It pulses within our bodies. Water is the source and permeates all beings. When I arrived in the Ish River bioregion in 1992, I felt a flutter of excitement, an affinity that I've never forgotten. Mountains and waters, embraced within the wild, a warm welcome home. I first encountered Dogen Zenji in Gary Snyder's essay, Blue Mountains Constantly Walking. His reflection on Dogen's Sansuikyo, or Mountains and Water Sutra, ignited my imagination and opened my heart, a spiritual beacon. A 13th century Japanese Zen Buddhist, Eihei Dogen is one of the most remarkable and highly regarded Zen teachers in the history of Zen. I wasn't yet practicing Zazen, but embarked on a journey to become more intimately familiar with this place. I followed salmon into watersheds, explored the bioregion, practiced reinhabitation. I was yearning to find something, seeking answers to make sense of my place in the world. At the turn of the century, I found my way to the Olympia Zen Center. I turned to the Mountains and Water Sutra with high hopes for enlightenment. Imagine my disappointment when, rather than awakening, I met confusion in phrases such as, "While the path of water is unknown to water, water still actually functions as water. And although the way of water is not unknown to water, water still functions as water." The driving question for Dogen was, if we are already enlightened, why do we need to put so much effort into practice? In the Mountains and Water Sutra, water is enlightenment. Whether we realize it or not, water is simply water. Enlightenment is simply our true essence. We practice to awaken our Buddha nature. To realize means to make real, not in our minds or perceptions, but penetrating every cell of our being. The binding force that connects and makes us whole, Great Spirit, God, higher power, the source, love, or any other name for the eternal and unknowable. With practice, I found what I was seeking, what had never been missing. Wholeness, always present in each moment. The most extraordinarily ordinary. With practice and persistence, this realization percolates into my being and connects me with the source. But then, I'm out of the moment, and the habits of delusion push their way back in. Impatience, irritability, resentment, confusion, selfishness, among many more. I'm at my best when I cultivate a connection with the source. For me, this comes from consistent practice of zazen, sitting meditation, creative expression, immersion in nature, and loving relationships. Communities of practice like Cedars help sustain me. I'm reminded that I'm not alone on this path, that we are all seeking, that we can draw on our collective wisdom and compassion to strengthen us. In this unfamiliar terrain of social distancing, we're embarking on a journey to explore and discover new ways of being in community. May we ground ourselves in the eternal truth that in this moment we are whole. We have everything we need to find our way together. I dedicate the lighting of this chalice to the mountains and waters of the Ish River country. May their eternal flow nourish, replenish, and guide us.
As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because they are our brothers and sisters, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
Still my dry land heart can sing. Earlier in Brian's chalice dedication, he used a phrase that I want to just pause and call to our mind. And that phrase is Ish River Country. Ish River Country. This was a phrase that I first encountered while reading the poetry of poet Robert Sund. And Robert used this term, Ish River Country, to describe the bioregion that we are living in here in Kitsap County, this Puget Sound or Salish Sea region. This was the term that Sund used to describe this inland sea region, Ish River Country. And when I read Sund's poetry and the use of this phrase, it seems to highlight a certain feature about this region. And that feature is the interconnection that exists in our bioregion. He describes this connection with these words. Like breath, like mist rising from a hillside, Duwamish, Snohomish, Duwamish, Samish, Snohomish, Skycomish, all the Ish rivers. I live in Ish River Country, between two mountain ranges, where many rivers run down to an inland sea. And so as we come together into this space of worship, may these words inspire in us a deeper connection to the waters, land, and air that sustain us, and call us into a deeper sense of connection with ourselves, one another, and the whole of creation. Come, let us worship together.
We worship with open hearts, nurture a learning spirit, serve justice with compassion, and love without judgment. We worship with open hearts, nurture a learning spirit, serve justice with compassion, and love without judgment. We worship with open hearts, nurture a learning spirit, serve justice with compassion, and love without judgment.
I'm going to tell you a story this morning about a single drop of water and their journey throughout life. And I'm going to tell you this story as if I am that drop of water. Now, I know I don't look much like a drop of water, so use your imagination. Okay, so my first memory is of floating up through the sky. And I realized as I was floating that there were lots of other things just like me all around. And together we drifted up and up and up. And then suddenly something exciting happened. I realized I had a form. I was a drop. I was a drop of water. And I realized that whoosh, 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 all the other things around me were also drops of water. And we really liked each other. And so we banded together and we became a big, puffy, wet, cloudy family. And that big, wet, puffy, cloudy family and I drifted through the skies, hither and yon. We had a great time. But then something unexpected happened, and we started to come apart. And I could feel myself as a drop again. And more than that, I was falling. I was falling fast. And friends, I have to tell you, that part was exciting. I was falling down out of the sky, and that was great. But as I was falling, I started thinking, and I started worrying, and I started wondering, what about my big cloudy family? Was I going to be alone? Was this my new form? So I fell, and I thought, and I worried, and I fell, and I thought, and I worried, and then, splat! I landed on the ground. And everything around me was green and very wet. But I didn't see my friends. And then something happened. I started sinking. I sank and I sank and I sank into the ground, and it was dark and it was cold and I was lonely and nervous. Where were my friends? They were all gone. And then I fell some more, and do you know what happened? I hit something hard, and I had fallen between a rock and a hard place. It was a hard time. But you know what? I persisted. It took time. It took a lot of time. But I made my way through that rock and out the other side. And when I got through the rock, I found a whole bunch of other drops that had also made it through the rock and the hard place. And they told me stories, amazing stories. One water drop told me about how they had been on a leaf that had been eaten by a deer, and well, you can imagine the rest of that part. And another one told me they had been part of a mighty storm. And I heard story after story, and again, we decided to band together. We decided to band together and call ourselves a stream. And so we began to flow together underground, our tiny little stream, gathering new drops as we went, until suddenly we were above ground and we could see the sun. And there were other streams, and we banded together with those other streams until we were a mighty river. And do you know what mighty rivers do? They rush. And so part of that mighty river, we rushed into something even bigger. One of the elder drops called it an ocean. And we tumbled into that ocean, and that is where I live now, in a gigantic ocean surrounded by other drops. And we get new friends all the time. Rain falls from the sky, and we celebrate them. And also, some of us leave. We go back up into the air, and we say goodbye. But because I've been on this journey, I have come to understand I'm not scared. I am not alone. I am always part of something bigger than I am as a single drop. Whether I'm part of a river or a tiny underground stream, whether I'm rain, even when I'm trapped between a rock and a hard place, I know that I am something much greater than myself. I am part of a whole. And that's my story. Thanks for listening.
Please join me in opening our hearts in a spirit of prayerful reflection as I share the reading Surface Tension, written by Tess Bomberger. Of course, there are people behaving badly during this pandemic, using it as an excuse to practice prejudice, to hoard, to blame, using it to divide and weaken us, cashing in on surface tensions for their own terrible benefit. The news daily shows these heavy things. In nature, surface tension gathers water molecules together so tightly that they form a sort of membrane, across which light things can dance. Leaves, insects, the wavering sun. It is why rain falls in discrete drops and babies can blow bubbles. Surface tension makes life possible. It helps drops collect along subtle edges of pine needles or leaves, running down to water roots, then helps sap rise to nurture those same gatherers of sun and water. Bitter tannins in chartreuse mosses increase the tension so larger drops can form, held aloft until they can be absorbed or used to foster new life. Here's the other picture revealed by this pandemic. People are reaching out in kindness and concern to acquaintances, neighbors, strangers, creating aquifers, revealing watersheds running through the tiny capillaries of human hearts, minds, homes, streets, and neighborhoods. Could the bitter tannins cause such large drops to form that we can scarcely hold them up until they can be absorbed? Until we can use them to foster life? Let us open ourselves wide to gather them, so that we may send them to the suffering, the grieving, the caregivers, and all the workers who were always essential. Let us send them across all those spurious divisions, because there's a deeper, humbler, more beautiful truth. We deeply need one another, especially now. We can pull together across distance to form a surface across which light things can dance and which can nurture life. May this be our prayer this day and in the days ahead. May it be so. Amen.
I've been in the wilderness, seems like 40 years, longing for water, cool, sweet, and clear. I met a band of wanderers, they tell me it's near. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Come to the water and live. Some say it moves by moonlight, some say by the sun. Some say it's been here since before time had begun. Some say it's many, others say it is one. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Come to the water and live. Men in robes will tell you that they own the stream. Just move yourself upriver, their power is a dream. You can hold a mouthful in a trembling hand, but if you make a fist, not a drop can remain. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Come to the water and live. It It doesn't matter with a bowl or a cup, with a glass or a bucket, you can lift it up. It doesn't matter if you feel all you think. When you are parched, all you have to do is rain. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Come to the water and live. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Everybody's thirsty, come on down to the water. Come to the water and live. Come to the water and live.
Water is pretty darn important. It's a substance that falls into that category of needs that we explored in last week's service. Life needs water. On the hierarchy we talked about, there's air, water, food, shelter, the need to be seen. This is one of those essential things that without water, life would not happen. Life needs water. That's why when scientists are probing the depths of space for signs of life, they look for trace amounts of water. Water is pretty darn important. And I believe that water also can offer us a lesson. In our call to worship earlier, I shared the words of the poem in which Robert Sun names our bioregion, Ish River Country. I'll share that poem again now so we can hold it in our minds together. Like breath, like mist rising from a hillside. Duwamish, Snohomish, Duwamish, Samish, Snohomish, Skycomish, all the Ish rivers. I live in the Ish River country between two mountain ranges where many rivers run down to an inland sea. In my understanding, this poem invites us to think about the connection that exists within the network of rivers and waterways that we live on here in Kitsap County, in Ish River country. For Sund and those who affirm the interconnection of the natural world, there is strength and beauty and balance in recognizing this connection. A recognition that places the health of one river or stream in conjunction with the health of other bodies of water. After all the rivers run into the sea, and yet the sea is not full. And from the source that they flow from the sea, they again are evaporated. These drops go up into the air only to make their way back down again. Just like in the story that Catherine shared with us earlier. Sure, each time that this cycle unfolds, the path might be slightly different. But in the end, the destination is always the same. There's something about the nature of water that calls each drop back home. It's like the quote from the Mountains and Water Sutra that Brian shared. While the path of water is unknown to water, water still actually functions as water. And although the way of water is not unknown to water, water still functions as water. Thinking of this connection in the physical sense. I'm reminded of an example of connection on the spiritual level, or at least communal level. This stole that I'm wearing, this piece of material around my shoulders here, this stole was a gift to me for my ordination by the members of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. The design of the stole is meant to represent the river of life, the metaphoric river we all enter. From the moment we come into this world, the current of this river sweeps us along to our destination. The flow of this river moves us through life until the banks that form the channel lead us to the sea, to the unknown source of life to which we all return. When I was presented this stole, there was an added level of meaning given. When the members of my ordination committee presented this stole and placed it over my shoulders, they explained how the design was meant to be a reminder of how the waters of the San Francisco Bay were connected to the waters here in Kitsap County, to the waters of the Salish Sea of Ish River Country. It was a reminder that somehow, despite the distance that exists between us, this physical distance, a relationship still exists between me and this congregation that ordained me. That there's something that despite distance, we still were connected. All this talk about connection and bridging the distance is nice, but I think we can only truly understand the importance of honoring such connection when we see examples of how such connection isn't honored. In another poem by Robert Sund, we're given a glimpse of what it is like when we lose this sense of connection. In the poem titled Warehouser, Sund writes, "Everyone knows about the rotten air in Everett, Washington. Everyone knows how the fish go belly up in the water, but this town is a text Warehouser can't seem to read. This is the book that will close over their frail wings and not open again." In this poem, we see an example of what happens when we lose this sense of connection and act without consideration for the whole of creation. When we do this, the air turns putrid, rotten, toxic. And when this happens, it's not just the air that is impacted. People, animals, water, the whole web of life is detrimentally impacted. We are living in a time when it is easy to start to lose our sense of connection. We are cut off from each other. Like a single drop of rain, we find ourselves out of the context of the whole. And yet, despite these feelings of isolation, in new and innovative ways, this community continues to be together, to somehow manifest that interconnected nature. Thinking of this reality, my mind can't help but alter the words of the Mountains and Waters Sutra that Brian shared, replacing the word water with something else. Listen. While the path of community is unknown to community, community still actually functions as community. Or what if we said it this way? While the path of church is unknown to church, church still actually functions as church. Although the way is not known, we still function as church community. Despite the space between us, we are held together in the web of creation. it's important that we not lose sight of this truth. We need to continue to honor the connection that binds us together, or risk the fate of turning putrid, rotten, and toxic. And so, at this time, as a reminder of this connection, I now invite us into a moment of reflection. Make yourself comfortable. Take a deep breath with me. Breathing in and out. Settle yourself in. In your mind's eye, see the golden thread that runs from each of us, connecting all of us, binding us together. Let this thread be a reminder of the fact that we are still connected despite the space that dwells between us. And as we continue to breathe and reflect on this connection, I will now offer these blessings for members of our community who pour their water out as an affirmation of our connection and the blessings in the year ahead.
I pour water for possibilities in times of change and challenge.
Hope.
Connection. Resilience. Intentional.
Fearlessness.
Power.
Connection.
Delight.
Nurturing.
Wishing health for Cedars and everyone.
And I'll wish for vitality on top of that, health for Cedars and everyone.
Connection.
Hope. Readiness.
Patience.
New connections.
Transformation.
May this symbolic act of pouring out our waters be a reminder of the fact that we are all connected. And though it may seem like we're on our own separate journey at times in life, in the end, we all make our way back to the same source.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we're together again.
Our service this day has ended, but our service to one another and the world begins anew. May our time together be a reminder of the deep and abiding connection we share, despite the space that dwells between us. May it be so.